Hello, and have I got something for you today. Welcome to Daphne V TV, and I promise to share with you the cheapest thing in the world, but not until I tell you a story first. Cue the theme music, but I don't have any yet. So here's what I want to invite you to do. If you can think of a theme song for Daphne V TV, a show for chain breakers and wave makers, I'd love to have you put it in the comments. That's where all the action really happens, is in the comments. So I'd love to see what you have to say. So let me tell you that little story, and then I'm going to reveal to you what the cheapest thing in the world is. And I can tell you right away, it's not a hug or a smile. It's something else. So I once knew a gal who not only believed in fairy tales, she tried to create a fairy tale. She would often believe what the prince told her. She would change what she wanted to accommodate him. She would say things and do things that she really didn't have a heart for in order to keep the peace. And one of the easiest things for this princess, if you will, was one of the easiest things for her to do was to believe everything that the prince had to say. Until one day, the truth was revealed. And she realized that after all the talk and all the promises, that fairy tale really had some nightmare aspects to it. And once that revelation happened, she decided to break some chains and make some waves. Welcome again to Daphne V TV, where today's episode is going to be a little extra salty. So warning, if you have high blood pressure, this ain't the episode for you. I'm here to share with you the cheapest thing in the world. And before I do that, I promise it's coming. I promise. I want to know where you're joining me from today. Again, pop that in the comments for me. And where you're from, where you're watching this from, could be like what part of the country or the world are you in? Or it could also be, hey, I'm sneaking this during work. Hey, I'm riding the subway. Hey, I'm sitting out on the deck sunning myself. I'd love to know where you're catching this episode of Daphne V TV. So let's get to it. You want to know what the cheapest thing in the world is? It's talk. T-A-L-K. Talk. Talk is the cheapest thing in the world. Words don't cost us a dang thing. We can say, to a large degree, whatever we want to whomever we want about whatever we want. Cue the social media trolls, but don't, because I'm not going to put up with that. All right. Let's think about it. How many times has somebody said something to you, and I hope you haven't done it yourself, and they had zero intention of following through, but hey, it was just words. They just said it. Well, I'm here today to give you 3 different chunks or 3 different ideas, 3 different concepts as to how to break the cycle of cheap talk. And I'm not talking about the band. Number 1, what happens when you get cheap talk? Okay, so there's getting cheap talk, there's giving cheap talk, and there's keeping it real. So we're going to start with getting cheap talk. And I have a passage from one of my favorite books for you. That passage comes from 1 Corinthians 13:1, and it says, If I speak in the tongues of men and women, because we're not going to be hating on people today, and of angels, but not love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. I am sure this is not an uncommon verse to you. In fact, it's read, I think, at most weddings. It's kind of known as part of the love verse. But that's the point. If words are spoken in truth and in love, there's going to be action behind them. Because if not, if there's no action behind those words, anyone can say, I love you. In fact, heck, we say it to a cheeseburger or a super good cocktail or maybe a piece of cheesecake, sunset, flower, whatever. We can say, I love you. But what is the action behind it? If there's no action behind it, it doesn't even matter. Why even say the words? Those words become empty words. So maybe that's an empty verse if there's no action behind it. And I'm not calling that book empty, all right? I'm just trying to get you to wrap around your mind, expand your idea of the power of words so that when somebody gives you their word, that you make sure it's not empty because they're going to put some action behind it. You know, the thing is, it goes to intention. What did they mean when they spoke those words? Were they, like the princess earlier in the story, or the prince, were they just trying to please or appease someone? Were they just saying it to hear themselves talk? Now, I don't know if you're familiar with kind of a TV icon here in the States named Judge Judy. She tells it like it is, and let me tell you, there is no cheap talk that comes out of that woman's mouth. And she wrote a book one time called Don't Pee on My Leg and Tell Me It's Raining. She didn't have the Southern accent to it. But anyway, the point is, don't say one thing and do something else. So when somebody is giving you cheap talk, check them. You have every right to ask for action if words are spoken. So now, what about when we give cheap talk? Again, I'm sure most of you have never ever done this. And if you have, you may be feeling a little convicted right now, not condemned. We don't do condemnation here. Conviction means a positive reminder that something needs to change. Condemnation is all about shame, and I ain't got no time for the shame game. So let me go back to number 2, which is giving cheap talk. Number 1 was getting it from others. Number 2 is, what about when we give it? I mean, sometimes it's just kind of easier to say something to somebody to get them to hush. But when we do that, then we are falling into the giving cheap talk trap. So I want to give you another power verse, if you will, and it's from Ephesians 4:29, and it says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths. And that doesn't just mean potty mouth, y'all, okay? But only what is helpful for building others up to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. In other words, don't blow smoke, okay? When you are saying something to someone, let it edify them. Let those words be like a gift. Like one of my mentors and major life influencers, Florence Littauer, had a book called Silver Boxes. Our words ought to be gifts that we give someone else. And I don't know about you, but if somebody gave me an empty box, I'd be like, hey, what's up? Not cool. I want something in it. So when we give our words, We need to have something behind it. We need to have action behind it. Being women of integrity is crucial to being a woman of worth. And remember that blowing smoke, it causes cancer, y'all. It does. It's poison. So words can be edifying. And you know when somebody's giving you a genuine compliment and when somebody's just blowing smoke. If you've ever been to a high school reunion, perhaps. If you're on social media sometimes, perhaps. My point is this. When you give words, make sure there's value and action behind them. Unless you are a ghostwriter, you are not getting paid by the word. So sometimes less is more. And finally, the third chunk. So we talked about getting cheap talk from others, about giving cheap talk to people. Chunk number 3 is keep it real. Keep it real, y'all. Here's a passage to go with that point, and it's from Matthew 5:37. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. Have you ever talked to somebody, or more likely you were in a position of listening, where you couldn't get a word in edgewise? And like you got confused and dizzy listening to them because they were taking you all over, and perhaps they were even contradicting themselves. So when we keep it simple, we can keep it real. And hey, if you say yes, let it mean yes. If you say no, make it mean no. There are people who talk just to hear themselves, and we can cut down on confusion and communication breakdowns if we will be very clear in our words. Sometimes less really is more. I remember when my kids were young, I wanted them to really be able to rely on my word. I wanted them to be able to count on me, that if mama said something, mama meant it. And that could have been from, you better do that, I'm going to paddle your hiney, or, hey, we're going to Disney World, okay? And anything in between. And I would make a point that when they wanted to know like what was for dinner, something as simple as what's for dinner. If I told them we were going to have meatloaf one night and they wound up getting peanut butter and jelly, what the heck? What's up with that? Can they trust my words with something as simple as they can rely on what's going to be on their plate at night? So maybe I was too hard on myself. Maybe I read too much into it. I don't know. Like you, I'm sure you're doing the best you can in all areas of your life. Simply remember that talk really is the cheapest thing in the world because anybody can do it. Words don't cost anything to speak, but once they've been spoken, they can cost a tremendous amount, especially if one loses trust and we can't rely on that person or someone can't rely on us. So here's the whole summary for today. For women who have heard it all and are tired of cheap talk, number 1, if you don't mean it, don't say it. And I encourage you to hold other people to that accountable level as well. If you don't mean it, don't say it. Just don't say it. Don't say it just to appease or plead. To please or appease. Y'all, I cannot even get the word appease out. Number 2, pleasing others by saying what you think they want to hear is not pleasing them. It's pacifying them. And it's setting yourself up for failure and a loss of credibility and integrity. So don't say something just to please somebody else. Neither one of you will benefit from it. And finally, if you say it, do it, be it, mean it. And that's what I want to leave you with today. I want to encourage you to be a chain breaker and a wave maker, to say what you mean and mean what you say, and follow through on the promises that you make, so that you are known as somebody whose word isn't cheap. It's equal to platinum, because people can and will count on you. Now, before you go, I want to ask you to do one of three things. I want to know in your comments, or in the comments, I want to hear from you. I want to know which one of these points resonated with you the most. Have you had people give you cheap talk? Have you been the one to give cheap talk? And how do you feel about keeping it real? How important is that to you? I want to thank you for joining me today. And I would love to have you either subscribe to Daphne V TV show on YouTube, so you'll get notifications each week when these episodes come out, to share this with a friend. Maybe you have a friend who has been, gosh, I hate to use the word victim, but she's somebody who has had a lot of people give her a lot of cheap talk, or a lot of lip service, if you will. Maybe she needs to hear this so she can get a little bit of perspective and a little bit of power and a little bit of permission to hold people accountable when they say stuff. And finally, I want you to stop accepting cheap talk. And when you stop accepting cheap talk, you start owning your worth and claiming your value, and you start having words from others that if they're not platinum, they're not worth your time. They're not worth your energy. Don't let them come in your ears. So here's what I want you to do today, is I want you to give yourself permission to practice accountability for yourself and for others. Bye for now.